July 19th, 2026, MetLife Stadium, New Jersey. Lamine Yamal is 19 years old, starting a World Cup final. Nobody coached him to play like that. Rewind 10 years, March 24th, 2016. Johan Cruyff dies in Barcelona. Not suddenly, not without warning. He'd been fighting lung cancer for months, and everyone close to him knew this day was coming. He was 68. That same day, an 8-year-old is inside Barcelona's youth system, 2,000 kilometers from anywhere Cruyff is. His name is
Lamine Yamal.
He never met Cruyff, never saw him coach, never will. Sit with that for a second, because none of this should have happened. 10 years after that day, Yamal is playing a version of football that is, unmistakably, Cruyff's, on the biggest stage the sport has, in a final his country won. So, here's the question worth asking before anything else. How do you inherit a way of playing from a man you've never met? It sounds like a coincidence. It isn't one. To understand why, let's go back to a smaller moment. June 19th, 1974. A World Cup group match against Sweden in Dortmund. A Dutch forward with his back to a defender named Jan Olsen. Cruyff drags the ball behind his own standing leg, spins 180 degrees, and is gone before Olsen finishes committing to the tackle. The Cruyff Turn. Born in front of a scoreless draw that nobody remembers for the result, everybody remembers the turn. Olsen himself never got bitter about it. Decades later, he put it simply, "I wasn't humiliated, I had no chance. Cruyff was a genius." A man got beaten so badly on live television that the trick was named after his opponent, and he spent the rest of his life proud to have been part of it. It's still taught in youth academies on 5 continents today, usually before the kids learning it are old enough to know whose name is attached to it. That tournament wasn't just about individual moments. The Dutch had a name for what they were doing: total football. Any outfield player could switch positions with any other mid-match, and the shape held anyway. Rinus Michels built the system as Ajax manager in the late 1960s. Cruyff was the one who made it look inevitable on a pitch. The player every other position rotated around. Michels called it pressing without the ball. Cruyff just called it common sense. It was never really about the trick. By then Cruyff had already won the Ballon d'Or twice, and would win a third that December. And he still put it more bluntly than almost any coach before or since. "I find it terrible when talents are rejected based on computer stats. Based on the criteria at Ajax now, I would have been rejected. When I was 15, I couldn't kick a ball 15 meters with my left." That's not a complaint about the past, that's a warning about a type of player, the ones systems are built to reject. 50 years later, that type of player was the best in the world. None of that was Cruyff showing off. If you're only counting the physical numbers, that's a scouting report on a player who shouldn't have made it. Ajax sold him to Barcelona anyway. August 1973, 6 million guilders, roughly $2 million, a world record fee for a 26-year-old fresh off a European Cup win the summer before. Barcelona didn't just buy a player, they bought a philosophy, and it worked immediately. In his first season, 1973-74, Barcelona won the league for the first time in 14 years, beating Real Madrid 5-0 away from home along the way. The idea had a track record before anyone had a name for it. The system needed a second body to survive him. In 1988, Cruyff returned to Barcelona as manager, and in the reserve side found a skinny teenage midfielder the club's own staff had all but written off. Too fragile, too weak defensively, Cruyff watched him for one match, moved him into a deeper role as a pivot, and built his entire system around him. That midfielder was Pep Guardiola. He made his first team debut on December 16th, 1990, in a 2-0 win over Cadiz at Camp Nou, at 19 years old. The following season, Cruyff's Barcelona won the first of 4 consecutive league titles. Koeman, Laudrup, Stoichkov, then in May 1992 at Wembley, they beat Sampdoria 1-0 on a Koeman free kick in extra time, the club's first ever European Cup. That same summer, Guardiola added Olympic gold medals to his collection too, playing for Spain on home soil in Barcelona. The Spanish press had a name for that side: the Dream Team. Guardiola himself kept playing under Cruyff for 5 more seasons, then stayed on at Barcelona as a player for over a decade, absorbing the same system before he ever coached a single session of it. By the time he retired as a Barcelona player, he'd won 6 league titles and a European Cup wearing the shirt Cruyff put him in. None of this explains what happens next yet. It explains why none of it was an accident. Here's the detail that's easy to miss underneath all of it. Cruyff himself never won that trophy as a player. He was a runner-up that same year, beaten 2-1 by West Germany in a final his own Dutch side led inside the first 2 minutes. 4 years later, he refused to play in the 1978 World Cup entirely after a kidnapping attempt against his own family in Barcelona. The World Cup was the one thing missing from his career. The closest he ever came, he watched from outside the game entirely. A tournament won years later by a team playing an idea that was his in a shirt he never wore. Now, here's the part of this story that would be easy to leave out if all you wanted was a clean arc. For years, Cruyff gave the public a dramatic reason for turning down Real Madrid in 1973. He refused to play for what he called Franco's club. He said it for decades. It's not the whole picture. Biographical accounts, including his own memoir, suggest the deal actually collapsed over money, a dispute over the transfer fee Ajax was keeping. The political line may have been what he told the press, nobody outside the room knows for sure. Even his 1978 World Cup withdrawal spent decades being told as a political protest, before Cruyff himself confirmed, years later, that the real reason was the kidnapping attempt. And there's a second complication from the last person you'd expect. Guardiola himself called it a lie. Tiki-taka, he said, was passing the ball for the sake of it with no clear intention, and completely made up. There's a third one too. Cruyff's own reign as Barcelona manager didn't end on his terms. In 1996, club president Josep Luis Núñez fired him, capping years of tension between them. He built the dream team, and the club he turned into a superpower pushed him out of the door he'd walked through as a champion. That complication doesn't weaken the story. Cruyff wasn't a flawless prophet. He built an idea bigger than his own biography, durable enough to keep improving through other people's careers, even as his own stayed messy and half-explained. It's the same academy, incidentally, that produced Messi in between Guardiola and Yamal, a player many consider the greatest the sport has ever seen, still playing by rules Cruyff wrote down decades before either of them arrived. Guardiola's own path away from playing tells you how deliberately this idea kept moving. On June 21, 2007, he took his first ever coaching job in charge of Barcelona's B team. No managerial experience of any kind. 3 weeks later, on July 13th, Lamine Yamal was born in Esplugues de Llobregat, a few kilometers from where Guardiola had been promoted to the pivot 17 years earlier. Neither of them knew the other existed yet. Guardiola went on to manage Barcelona's first team for 4 seasons, sharpening Cruyff's principles with Xavi and Iniesta as his instruments. He'd go on to export the same principles to Bayern Munich and Manchester City, proving the idea could survive being translated into German and English too. Between them, Xavi and Iniesta went on to win 2 European Championships and the 2010 World Cup, the one trophy that had eluded Cruyff his entire career. Iniesta scored the winner in that World Cup final himself. The 116th minute of extra time, one touch to control a pass from Cesc Fabregas, then a right-footed strike into the corner past goalkeeper Martin Stekelenburg. Spain's first World Cup, decided by a player who spent his whole career being taught never to waste a touch. That generation trained the next one. Yamal, Pedri and Gavi came up through La Masia under coaches shaped by Guardiola's Barcelona. Disciples of a disciple, none of them ever once in a room with the man whose ideas they were absorbing. None of the three learned it the same way. Yamal was the improviser, the one who solved problems with a piece of skill nobody drilled into him. Pedri was the metronome, the one who never lost the ball because he refused to need more than one touch to decide where it was going. Gavi was the will, closing distances Cruyff's own system was built to eliminate in the first place. 3 different bodies, 3 different jobs on the pitch, one shared blueprint underneath all of them. By the time that tournament kicked off, Pedri had already won the Golden Boy Award as Europe's best young player, and Gavi had become one of the youngest players ever capped by the senior Spanish national team. Yamal hadn't won anything like that yet. He was about to. But the idea nearly died in public before it ever reached them. 2014 Brazil. Spain, the defending champions, crashed out in the group stage. The low point came against the Netherlands, 5-1, one of the most one-sided results the tournament had seen in years. Euro 2016 in France, round of 16 again. Vicente Del Bosque, the manager who led Spain to the 2010 World Cup and Euro 2012, left the job in wreckage. Tiki-taka, the philosophy that once won everything, gets called dead on live television. Finished, slow, empty. Then Cruyff dies, same year. He never finds out if any of it survives the verdict. 50 years after Cruyff first did it against Sweden, a teenager who never met him runs it back. Not an identical goal, not an identical body, the same principle in a body it was never taught to. Euro 2024. France had taken the lead in the 9th minute at the Allianz Arena in Munich. 12 minutes later, Yamal picked the ball up 25 yards out, shifted it onto his left foot, and bent a shot travelling over 100 km an hour past Mike Mignon into the top corner of the inside of the post. He was 16 years and 362 days old, 4 days shy of his 17th birthday, and the youngest player to ever score at a European Championship. Spain went on to beat England 2-1 in the final 5 days later, Oyarzábal's late strike sealing it. The idea that had been declared dead less than a decade earlier had just won a European Championship, carried in its most decisive moment by the youngest player the tournament had ever produced. 2 years later, that generation didn't stop there. You already know how it ended. Torres off the bench, extra time, Spain champions again. What the scoreline doesn't capture is what it took to get all three of them anywhere near that stage. Gavi had spent the 2 years since that Euros absence clawing his way back from the same ACL tear, and by the final itself, he and Pedri were watching from the bench, not the pitch, present for it, but not carrying it the way Yamal was. The trophy Cruyff spent his whole career chasing and never got, the one Xavi Iniesta finally brought home in 2010 while playing by his rules, this generation just won it again, twice from the man who invented the idea, and it still worked. Here's a pattern, not a coincidence. A player rejected on paper who reinvents what matters on a pitch. A manager who inherits that idea and hands it to a 19-year-old nobody trusted. An idea declared finished twice before it ever finished proving itself. A B-team job taken with nothing to prove, and a birth 3 weeks later that nobody connected until much later. A trophy the man who built the idea never lifted himself, won twice now by disciples who never met him. A generation that never sat in the same room, playing like they did anyway. So here's the bigger question underneath all of this. Cruyff never won the World Cup. He never coached Yamal, Pedri or Gavi. He's been dead for a decade. He never got to lift it himself. The players who never met him have done it twice now. Xavi and Iniesta in 2010, Yamal's generation in 2026. Nobody handed them a manual. Nobody sat them down and explained who Johan Cruyff was or why finding space matters more than winning a sprint. They just kept doing it anyway, one generation after the next, until it stopped being his idea and started being theirs. That's not a haunting, that's just what it looks like when something is actually true. Cruyff warned that talent like his would keep getting rejected by the numbers. Yamal is the proof the warning was right, and proof it didn't matter. He lost every argument about how his own idea should be run. He never lost the idea, he built it in Amsterdam, refined it in Barcelona, and none of the losing arguments mattered in the end. So let us know what you think in the comments down below. Did Cruyff actually lose, or did he just find a way to keep playing through people who never knew his name? And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to AsWatch as we watch football together. See you next time.